Welcome back to Season 3 of Living Room Logic. We're having the first episode of the new season, and we are trying to make a trend that we're going to do the first episode on the coolest thing happening right now in space, astronomy, cosmology, because we all like staying up late and looking at the stars and thinking, hey, I wonder if there's other dudes procrastinating around those stars on those planets, imagining cool stuff. And one of the best ways that we really appreciate how cool everything is going on around us, and when we're looking at the stars, we're like, I want to see it clearer. So I'm going to get some binoculars. I'm going to do this with my hands. I'm going to make fake binoculars and see it clearer. Then some fella called Galileo was like, lad, let's not. And he made a telescope. And he was the first man to see Jupiter. And around Jupiter, looking through his little dodgy new lens telescope, he saw moons around Jupiter. And that was awesome. And what most of us grew up with was the Hubble Telescope. And the Hubble Telescope is, I guarantee you, 90% of the coolest images you have ever seen of galaxies, of stars, of new stars being born. Everything like that came from the Hubble Telescope, which is the one that's circling around the planet right now. However, that was before the year 2000. Hubble is an old lady, and she needs to be retired because we have new, good technology. However, it's 2021. So we expect the next telescope to be class. And the next telescope is going to be class, and it's called the James Webb Telescope. Okay? And it is going to change the world. However, we started planning for it in 1996.
Yes, we...
What? And what?
What? Yeah.
I know bureaucracy slows stuff down, Aidan, but 1996 to now, that's a lot of people's lifetimes that listen to this, just to get
Andrew
a telescope up.
tasked me with looking at why the hell it took so goddamn long to get this telescope ready. And actually, as of, I'm pretty sure, last Friday, and we're in the end of November right now, there was yet another delay in the telescope. So it's now being pushed again. But let's go way back. It was actually like right before they were about to launch the Hubble Telescope that they were already thinking about its successor. And the thing about the Hubble Telescope is that so for the first thing, it's got a much smaller mirror than what they decided for this new one. But its main purpose was to look at things in the visible spectrum of light, things that we can see with the naked human eye, and a little bit into what is called the infrared spectrum of light, which is slightly longer wavelength. And that's actually, we can actually perceive that as heat. So that's all heat is infrared energy. And that's really cool. We can't see it, but we can feel it with our skin, which is kind of weird. But we want to actually be able to visualize it. And that's kind of cool because this is what this James Webb Telescope is being designed for. So they started with like, right, we're going to make this huge, big-ass telescope because you need a massive mirror to focus down this infrared energy. It's a lot more difficult than visible light. So that was the first major hurdle. And they actually started preliminary designs like literally 1997, 1998. And it took them like nearly 8-9 years just to get into like detailed design phase, because every single thing that they needed what didn't exist yet. The telescope needed to be huge, so they didn't know how to do that. It needed to be super sophisticated. These infrared sensors had never been made before. They had never been made to that scale. And so they're probably the hardest job is actually making those sensors that what happens is what they came up with was huge 6 meter mirror with 18 different hexagonal panels that are gold plated. So they're really good at mirroring infrared. And then it hits another mirror, and then another mirror, and then another mirror, and then goes into the sensor. And so, and the thing's huge, what they ended up coming up with. But then, over those first kind of 6, 7, 8 years, the contractor changed, and NASA went into this phase called faster, better, cheaper, or at least that's what it's unofficially known as. And they wanted to try and make things on much lower budgets. So the budget started at about $550 million from the US government. That's equivalent today of about $850 million. That was completely blown out of the water within the first, I'd say, that preliminary design stage. So they hadn't even actually made the proper designs yet, and they had already blown the whole budget. And on the blueprints of the blueprints. You're talking super preliminary. So God. Then we move into that detailed design phase, and what happened was right around this time there were actually a lot of failures. The Hubble Telescope, when it was first launched, actually had a fatal flaw. There was a design fault in the Hubble Telescope, and that was because they didn't do a couple tests that they could have if they had a higher budget and if they put more time and effort into it. So they decided, we're not going to make that mistake again. We're going to make this exceptionally bureaucratic, and we're going to go through every single which test or assessment or quality assurance thing we can. So from 2003 to about 2009, that's what they did. They just did tests, design tests, and finally in 2008, 2009, they started building the damn thing. They had already gone over budget by, I don't know, you're talking, maybe they're already at about $5.5 billion at this point. So this design phase was just so difficult because everything that was in the goddamn telescope didn't exist yet, and they didn't realize just how difficult it would be. One of those hurdles that they came up with, other than the mirror is ingenious, but there's this thing underneath the mirror, and it's called a heat shield, and it's the size of a tennis court, and it's basically what they came up with were these like unraveling aluminium, another thing called Kapton foil that unfurls over like a month, and there's 5 of those in 5 layers of those, and on one side of the telescope that would allow all the sun's energy to be absorbed. So it'll be about 100 degrees Celsius on that side, and then on the mirror side it's minus 220 degrees Celsius. So that, and the reason it needs to be that damn cold is because it needs to be that cold to make the measurements of infrared. You can't make infrared measurements from the Earth because the Earth emits infrared radiation. It emits heat. So anything you try and do, you wouldn't be able to do it. So it's really, really cool. In about 2011, the US government tried to they just tried to stop it. They were like, they put in a vote, and the vote went past. It went through the Senate. And then every single astronomical society in the world, any of the big ones, begged them to keep it going. And then they decided they would. And from then to now, they have been preparing for a launch in French Guiana, which is about to happen today. So another 10 years happened, and testing every single piece in acoustic chambers. So that's when the rocket gets really loud. They need to make sure that the pieces don't fall apart. They put them in seismic chambers, so they mimic earthquakes, which is so cool, by the way. But they put the whole thing together and just shake it violently. It's crazy.
Really cool test. Kind of irrelevant for something floating in space, no?
Yeah, well, the thing is,
you know what
when
I mean?
it's going up in the rocket, you're hitting serious G's, and shaking that happens is enough to break something. So, in the end of everything, this telescope is by far the most expensive telescope in the world's history. You're talking a budget of about $8.5 billion. I actually think it's more now. So they've gone over 8.5.
Yeah, I think it is. I think it's closer to 10
it's really
now.
going up to 9 or 10. And I think it was actually in 2010 that news article came out in Nature, which is a really popular natural science journal for scientific literature. And the title of the paper was "The Telescope That Ate Astronomy." And they just went on and on about, is this worth it? And because the fact is they should basically show this really interesting graph in that news article that over time that the James Webb budget took up nearly half of the astrophysics budget of NASA by the end of it. So I think people are going to be really happy to just get this thing off.
That is crazy.
Yeah, such a story, like.
It is a great story, and no pressure on the telescope to deliver, because not only has NASA and ESA, the European Space Agency, has put money in it too. Not only have they put so much money in it and so much man hours and so much of this and everything, it's also the whole world is kind of holding its breath because of what it promises. Because like you were saying there, the Hubble Space Telescope was brilliant. And we got some of the most beautiful images we could ever see. And like these things that looked like pieces of art pulled out of the Renaissance, like the dust clouds in space. Like there's so many famous pictures of nebulae and the columns of God and the pillars of God, I should say, and all of these different things. But you know what's constant in them? But clouds and dust, and there's so many fragments that distort the image that we can't see through on the on the visible spectrum. But this is exactly what the James Webb Telescope promises to get rid of. It promises to get rid of the cloudiness and the dust and the lack of resolution that you're getting. But the coolest thing, okay, we need to talk a little physics here. So Aidan talked about infrared. He talked about near infrared and how the Hubble Space Telescope, it went a little near infrared and then visible, a little bit like that. But this telescope, it got that infrared vision, right? It got that infrared vision. So if you've ever heard a ambulance coming at you and driving away from you, okay? If you've ever heard that, you've heard something called the Doppler Effect. And that's when something is far away from you, and as it gets closer, it goes from a low note to a high note, and then as it goes away, it goes from a high note to a low note. So it goes, yeah. So it goes up and then down. Yeah, but light does the same thing. Okay, light does the same thing. So what it does is when it's moving away from you, it shifts red. So it shifts red and moves into the red spectrum and the eventually infrared. If you go past red, you go into the infrared. Now, okay, so just keep that in your head. Keep that in your head, because this is super cool. We've talked about it, like dark energy before and stuff like that, and how the universe is expanding and it's getting faster and stuff like that. Okay? Given that the universe is expanding, everything is going away from us. So every single thing in the universe is getting pushed into the infrared. Everything. So you can look, if you look out into the deepest part of space, you're looking back in time. We've heard that before. But if you're only looking on the visual spectrum, there's a lot of things that have been gone so far and so fast that they're getting pushed into the infrared. And that's what I love about this. Because the promise of the James Webb Telescope is that it will be able to look so far and so far back that it will be able to look at the birth of galaxies and the birth of black holes and the birth of stars and distant nebulae, and we'd be able to look at what's being called the dark ages of the universe. Because this was so long ago and so pushed back by dark energy and accelerated away from us that it has shifted out of the visible spectrum and into the infrared. And the moment the James Webb Telescope goes up, if it points into a direction empty enough, it will be able to see further than we have ever seen before.
That's so cool.
And that absolutely blows my
It is insane.
So it is insane. And like, I get that Nature paper. And like, Nature is like the most prestigious journal in the world. And that Nature paper, it's pretty much saying they've put all their eggs in one basket. And they're in so deep that they're hedging their bets and making sure that they're testing everything. Because this thing can't fail. If this thing fails, it will be the worst thing to happen to science in forever. It is... So, but because of the promise it brings to be able to look back and open up an entirely new side of astronomy and cosmology is just so beautiful. Like, it's so elegant. It's so good. It's the kind of stuff that I can't wait to just see pictures come out and visualizations of this stuff, because this telescope can see well. So they did a measure of like what the magnification is. So, you know, you might get your house telescope or something like that might have like a times 40 magnification or whatever, and you might look at the moon and see the craters. The James Webb Telescope can see in so much detail that it could be 40 kilometers away from a euro and tell you the year on the coin.
That is insane resolution.
How outrageous. It's so crazy. You can't even imagine that kind of detail. But it has that detail. It's able to take images in the visible spectrum and the infrared, and it's going to be amazing to see what comes out of it. And it's not just looking into the distant past that we're going to be able to do. We're going to be able to look at things like, we're going to get a clear look at the spectra of distant worlds and be able to look at planets and the potential they have for life. Because a lot of the way, because we talked about this before, about the way that we look for life on other planets, and it's like, you wait until the planet moves in front of its star. The star shines light through its atmosphere, and based on how that light bounces around, we can tell if there's water, we can tell if there's this or that in the atmosphere, and if there's enough, we're like, hey, that's a promising sign. That's a planet of interest. We can't do it from Earth. Not well, because we have our atmosphere that messes everything up. And we look at everything and we're like, gosh, there's a lot of water in the universe. That's mad. Look at all that oxygen and all that water. That's our
so
strange, you know, because we're so like the James Webb Telescope will be able to get rid of that, and it'll be able to see in more detail than ever before, and it'll be able to even like measure like potential surface temperatures on these exoplanets and be able to take measures of like if it's potential. And this is the kind of cool stuff, because astronomy has kind of gone a little dull, and it's highly likely that it's because of this. It's because they've put so much money into this telescope, and that's money that could have gotten humans to Mars. It is. It's the same budget. It's money that could have gotten humans to Mars. We could have gone to the moon. We could have done all these amazing things, but instead we're banking on a telescope named James. And we're hoping that the $10 billion James lives up to the stuff, because if it bombs, oh Lord, but if it works, oh Lord, like if it works, we'll do a whole series probably on the stuff that it comes up with, because it will be just magnificent.
And I think it's kind of cool as well. Like, it's funny that you say the whole James, $10 billion James. I was actually reading something as well that I couldn't believe at the start. Hubble is close enough. It's actually in low Earth orbit. It's only about 600 kilometers away from Earth. And so we've actually gone over to Hubble physically and installed new things and updated its computers and updated everything and kept it going. And it's been going for 31 goddamn years. It was supposed to go for 5. So amazing, right?
Yep.
Hubble cost several billion over those 4 different missions, if not similar in value to what the James Webb is costing. So it's I think really what the issue was that they sold it so low at the start. They should have just kind of come out a little bit more honest and be like, hey, this is going to cost $5 billion. But it was just in a time that was faster, better, cheaper. Can we try and get it done for less? And the answer is no. Yeah. Because it's the one, it's the rarest thing. There is nothing like it in the whole universe. So no one else has ever been able to work on something like it. No one has ever made the exact same things. It's just a total feat of human accomplishment. You can't put a
brilliant.
$500 million price tag on that. So I think that was the issue.
Yeah, and it probably was. But I'm kind of at that point now where I don't care about the politics. I don't care about the budget. I want to see the liftoff. I want to see it get into space, and I want to see NASA connect, because the second it does, I know my mind is going to be blown massively. Okay, that's awesome.
And within 6 months, cool. We'll get images. So looking forward to summer next year if they send it off in December. It will be summer of 2022. And it will be some of the most life-changing images of things we have never seen before. Things that are too far away for us to have ever seen before.
And an absolutely welcome distraction. Jesus, I think we're all so sick of listening to. I feel like the last 2 years of science talk has been so miserable, and oh yeah, this COVID something, this hospital something. It's we want to escape back to the meta science, the science outside of us, the science that we just go, wow, and I feel like this is a step in that direction, and we are seeing steps in that direction in recent years, and I'm absolutely buzzed. I hope this episode comes out when it's launched, and if it didn't work out, this episode is not going out, and if you're listening to it, that's a good sign, okay? Because I can't take this.
Just please do it right. Get it in the goddamn place it's supposed to be.
Absolutely. All right, guys. It's been so interesting talking about the potential of the James Webb Telescope. I'm so excited. I am genuinely so excited. It's been great for you to listen. Follow us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, drop a review. We're active on Instagram and TikTok, so you can find us there too. And live and let live. Let's see those pictures, all right? Best of luck to you.